There were two video games that I was really looking forward to this year. One of them is a remake of Paper Mario, which is a GameCube game that came out 20 years ago that I've already beaten over 700 times. And the other one was Animal Well. I briefly mentioned it at the end of the Inessential Generation, mostly in service of a joke, but I'm gonna be real with you right now. This game is no joke. This is a very serious game. Don't laugh. This was the work of one Billy Basso, who built the game in a cave with a box of scraps for 700 years. He wrote the engine, he wrote the story, he wrote the graphics, he wrote the music, he did all of this with his bare hands. He didn't even use a computer, actually. To commit yourself for 7 years to doing all of this, largely on your own, that is beyond inspiring. And apparently, Funny Man Video Game Donkey thought so too, which is why he chose this to be the first game under his Big Mode publishing label. For my money, it was definitely worth it, especially since it was 10% off. This is not only a great video game, but it also couldn't have picked a better time to come out. It seems like such a comically perfect set of circumstances that a standout indie title would drop at a time when the implosion of the AAA industry is in full swing, and I have to imagine that Donkey feels unbelievably smug right now. For those of you who aren't familiar with Donkey lore, 10 years ago, Microsoft screwed him on some promotional deal while he was in a financially precarious situation early on in his career. He talks a little bit about this in his famous video, Microsoft Sucks. Jump to today, Microsoft sucks even more because they're firing everybody, and just days after killing 4 studios in cold blood, here comes Donkey with his secret weapon, Billy Basso, who slammed this unanimously acclaimed indie game on every platform except for Xbox. It's beautiful, it's like Greek mythology. Watch this, Microsoft is gonna try to buy Big Mode, and it's gonna be the most pathetic thing in the world. But before I talk about Animal Well, I want to talk about Donkey a little more. Now, Donkey Man's influence on me and my own channel is not a secret to anybody who's watched me for a bit, and I'm definitely not the first or only one who can say that. Aside from his sense of humor and his dumbass spaghetti and meatball jokes, this is a person who cares a lot about video games and the artistry behind them. There is a very potent undercurrent of sharp cynicism in his game reviews and essay-style videos that is very relatable. I have days where I feel like I've seen and played everything already, and that this is the end of the road, and I can no longer approach anything without assuming that it's gonna be ass, and sometimes I imagine this is how Donkey feels. Watching this guy make a complete mockery of quadruple A games that probably cost $3 billion and just as many if not more man hours to complete, it's cathartic in the short term, but it's also something that only gets more depressing the more you fixate on it. There is another side to Donkey though. When he reviews a game that he actually likes, suddenly he turns into Shakespeare and starts busting out Pulitzer Prize winning words like abstemious.
Nintendo is famous for their abstemious approach to introducing new mechanics.
That's not a gamer word, Dunk. Now these are gamer words. The overall tone of Donkey's videos has always been funny and entertaining, but the subtext of his more scripted videos indicates an earnest appreciation of video games. None of this is to say that all of his opinions are correct or that he never gets anything wrong, but at the end of the day, none of us can be correct all the time, right? Having watched him for years, he really does seem to care about the artistic integrity and potential of the medium, whether he expresses that perfectly all the time or not. And I think the very fact that he started Big Mode is pretty conclusive proof of that. This is not something you do for clout. This is something that would have taken tons of agonizing paperwork and money shit at a time when he has an actual baby to take care of. Any YouTuber can tell you the industry sucks and why. I literally did it last Thursday, but it's another thing entirely to take action like this. Big Mode is the publishing company with one singular purpose: make good video games. And you might say that sounds stupidly obvious, but apparently to a lot of developers, it's not. Animal Well is Big Mode's foot in the door. Donkey is putting his reputation and I assume his money on this one, which makes it harder to look away. This really is a match made in heaven, a super inventive and polished indie game with a new publishing company looking for exactly that kind of thing. And likewise, Donkey and Billy have a weirdly perfect comedic chemistry, a symbiosis if you will. Which brings us to the $900 billion question. Is Animal Well swell? Or is it more like going to hell? Well, I'll say this. It's no Weltris. But it's better than Valorant. One thing I really dig about this game is just how small the install size is. Games today are getting ridiculous. I still can't get over how a Call of Duty game is pushing or even exceeding 200 gigabytes. That's absurd. Animal Well is way more compelling than a lot of those, at least I think, and it's only 30 megabytes, which is insane by today's standards, even for a 2D game like this. This game is literally small enough to fit on a Nintendo 64 cartridge. You never see that today. And I would never have guessed it considering just how much stuff is in this game. Now, the Well type game can best be described as a Metroidvania with minimal combat. You play as a little blobby guy whose only ability is walking and jumping, but then he finds a slinky and it goes bep 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 bep. Animal Well is all about finding tools and figuring out how to use them. On the surface, they have one purpose, but eventually you realize that there are tons of little ways the components mesh with each other. The tools and items behave in ways that you might not even notice at first. There was this room with this wide chasm of water and a very high platform leading elsewhere. I wasn't sure if I was really expected to be here or not because the solution wasn't obvious to me in the moment, and riding on the frisbee didn't work because I wasn't high enough, but then I said, wait a minute. What if I blow a bubble and jump off of it to get more height, then toss the frisbee at this wall, and then super quickly blow another bubble so I can jump back onto the frisbee on the way back, and after like 20 attempts, I actually succeeded, and sure enough, it carried me all the way up there. I don't know if I was expected to do that, but it totally worked. I felt like a genius. My favorite thing is the animal flute, which lets you play actual notes on it, so people with musical inclinations can actually dick around with it and try to play something. Check it out, I've almost got down Joy to the World.
Merry Christmas, Xbox.
Then I tried to do Megalovania. That one didn't go as well. There are a ton of neat little things you learn in this game the more you play it, all kinds of surprising responses from the game and its universe. It's a very reactive and conscientiously designed world to an extent that more video games should embrace. It's like Gabe says, the world's gotta react to you. You can have fun in this game just by watching shit happen. The visuals are excellent. It is a standout title amongst hundreds of modern pixel art games, heavily embellishing that now ubiquitous style with an absurd array of enhancements and granular details that can never be taken for granted. Backgrounds are highly animated, environments are robust in their color palettes, the lighting is phenomenal. Seeing the explosions and the shadows and the smoke effects when you throw a firecracker never gets old. Grass and vines will move as you walk into them, fog effects on the water, even taking into account the lighting. Little creatures and vegetation are all over the place. The well really is its own world, and there isn't much else like it. And look at this, if you play in window mode, you can shake the screen around and the foliage actually shakes with it. Billy didn't have to do that, but he did it anyway. The sound design is top of the line. The soundtrack gently flows in and out of existence like a faint breeze. That is until you get eaten by the giant bird, and then it's more like... Every sound effect is so punchy and satisfying, chipping away at a stalactite on the ceiling and watching it go psh. Firecrackers going crazy, opening a chest, whatever it is, it just sounds incredible. Similarly to something like Breath of the Wild, for a far more colloquial example, the atmosphere is rich but rarely overstimulating, which makes it the kind of game you can play for extended periods of time without turning your brain into soup. Now I love Doom Eternal because of its intensity, but it's a double-edged sword because I can only play it for an hour or two at a time before going fucking cyber psycho. Animal Well is on the opposite end of the spectrum, allowing you frequent moments to clear your mind, making it easier to play for extensive durations. The real showpiece of Animal Well is just that, the animals. What's funny about the animals in this game is that very few of them are fundamentally otherworldly creatures. They're often very real things that are portrayed in a very different light than you would expect, and they all serve a different purpose in the context of the game. These otherwise mundane creatures are turned into something whimsical or sometimes even sinister. There is a sort of Pikmin dynamic to the narrative where a lot of the time it seems as though there isn't really a tangible, malevolent force looming over you, but rather, quite simply, the natural, cruel indifference of the ecosystem that can kill you dead with no warning. It's not necessarily good versus evil, it's just the game of life. It's the food chain. And you're at the bottom. And again, there's no combat really, it's just a matter of evasion and symbiosis. Although there are definitely some more bizarro elements, especially in the back half, that make me second guess that reading. And that's one of the things that makes the game so compelling, is that it hides its hand very effectively. Animal Well is a very deceptive game. Between the colorful art direction and the ambient music and soundscapes, there are long stretches where it could easily be mistaken for a cozy game. And then this happens. The pacing in this game is unusually brisk for a Metroidvania. I felt like I had uncovered more of the map in 2 hours than I did in 7 hours of Super Metroid. Yet somehow at the same time, it still feels very expansive and robust in terms of content and physical space. It's a remarkably accessible experience even with the inclusion of some challenging moments. The controls are extremely responsive, and the puzzle solving and traversal are surprisingly intuitive, at least when getting the first ending. In my Link to the Past video, I said that when I was a little kid, I was not capable of playing games that had a lot of dialogue and tutorial and narrative-driven quests because I refused to read any of the words on the screen. So more often than not, the games I enjoyed the most had very little reliance on dialogue whatsoever. Animal Well communicates everything to the player with a grand total of 7 words, and 2 of those words are yo-yo. This is the kind of game you'll want to play multiple times to see how fast you can beat it, and I'm honestly legitimately excited to see what the speedrunning community does. That alone would have added a ton of replay value, but just for good measure, Billy actually went around and hid 3 billion secret eggs to collect, and if you find all of them, you get a secret cutscene of Donkey making a giant omelet.
Alright, that's everything that fits in there. Alright.
There are so many weird surprises that fly out of left field, and they kinda just don't stop, and even though beating the game regularly is a pretty manageable task, there are a number of puzzles near the end of the post-game that are very roundabout, and even after way too much time and chasing some red herring that I somehow believed could have been a clue, I still couldn't find everything. I was worried about spoiling this game too much, but there is just so much to this game that I don't think I physically can. Even after you unlock all the achievements in the game, there are still so many mysteries that aren't explained, so many weird threads to follow, and it feels so special to actually get to the game before all of those mysteries have been figured out. I give it a month. As excited as I am for that Paper Mario remake, I think Animal Well is the best game I played this year so far. There are some minor bumps in the road, but in this context, it's acceptable. It's so inventive and atmospheric and strange, and I just couldn't stay away. This game is a situation of the planets aligning. It's a highly polished and refined passion project that delivers precisely where these lumbering monoliths are falling short, and it not only legitimized Billy Basso as a developer, but also Donkey, Leah, and Big Mode as a publisher. And if we can expect this level of quality from their future endeavors, perhaps the video game medium can be salvaged after all. So yes, Animal Well is Animal Swell, and if you don't play it, you go to Animal Hell. Thank you so much for watching my video.